Hello folks, my name's David and today I want to look at all of the tools you're going to need to get started in creating small leather goods. Now I focus predominantly on watch straps. I am a bespoke maker of straps, but this will apply to basically anything you want to create out of leather that's not a saddle really. So wallets, bags, that kind of thing. Now a lot of you have asked me from my saving time video to do a recommended tools video, but I'm going to approach this from the perspective of people who are just getting started with leatherwork. So I'm going to recommend some tools on the cheaper end that are still very good. There's no need to spend an awful lot of money when you're just starting out. It's not really worth it in my opinion, unless you're heading into a professional trade with leatherwork. So I like to start with the cutting implements. Now my take is these OLFA knives for cutting leather. They are absolutely superb. Make sure you get the OLFA blades as well. That's what really makes them good. But the knives themselves are a stainless steel, slightly higher quality than the ones you'll use from the big box store, or the ones you can buy from the big box store. Really like these. If you don't like the little, I think 9mm snap-on knives, they also do this scalpel, very nice quality, a little bit more expensive. But, you know, if you don't like the flat profile blade, these cut so much better than the hardware store ones. It's not even funny. So I'm going to bring in a massive, huge bit of Chungus veg tan leather here. And I've been using this blade for a while, so it's probably a bit duller than it should be. I'm just going to hold this like a pencil and come down here with very minimal pressure, and you can see that that cuts superbly. Now this is important, especially in the manufacturing of straps, just because of the accuracy with which straps need to be cut. Having an accurate knife will save you all sorts of problems, and the price difference between one of these and a big box one, it's just not enough to justify saving some cash. Where you can save some cash is on a skiving knife. So here's two examples. If you are a viewer of my Saving Time channel, you'll probably recognize this trash nugget. It's $3 on AliExpress. I have no idea how someone produces a knife for that little money. Well, I think I have a couple, but it would be impolite to say. But it's terrible. Now this one, as you can see, has been ground down and completely reprofiled and then sharpened. It's okay now. It took me a couple of hours to do, so if you fancy a couple of hours in the workshop, a $3 knife will actually do the job for you. I can probably show you here that this knife has no problems skiving off the end of this leather. So if you want a couple of hours in the workshop with some grinding stones, the $3 knife from AliExpress is fine. However, what I would recommend, and I'll link all of these down below, I have no affiliate links or sponsorships, these are just what I think is reasonable for the price. So this one, it's okay. You have to make the handle yourself. Again, not much of a problem. But it's about 15 bucks. I think you can often find it on sale for that price. And it is substantially better quality blade. It's easier to sharpen because these things need to be razor sharp. So in that vein, you will need, of course, sharpening stones. Now I use all sorts of different grit from about 800 to about 3000, and when I'm done with the stones, I will obviously bring in a strop with diamond paste. Now I recommend diamond paste over the cheaper compounds just because it lasts longer, so you'll end up saving money in the long run. You'll get a better result too, in my opinion. Although you can get a very good result with other sharpening compounds, I just like diamond because it lasts a long time and I'm a little bit cheap when it comes to replacing my compound. So that's what you'll need for cutting. Basically, grab the OLFA knives, whichever one you're comfortable with, and I would recommend this slightly more expensive one. But if you only want to spend $3, well, it's possible. So after you've got your leather cut, you'll need to get it marked for stitching. So a couple of things you can use for this. Now this is a marking owl. Again, a couple of bucks, buy anyone you like, they're not expensive. And this is a stitching owl. So they do slightly different jobs. You can just use one. No need to buy two, really. And the marking owl is, as you would expect, something you can use to make marks on leather. I would mark this like so to put a stitch line down it, and then obviously use the stitching owl to help me with that stitching. Now a slightly more accurate way to mark, especially along the edge of leather, for a stitch line would be one of these boys. Now these are also cheap. These actually look quite expensive in my opinion, or look like they should be quite expensive, but they're just not. I think they're about $5 US. With these, no ruler necessary. You just put one edge against the leather and mark down, and this will give you a nice consistent line down your edges. So definitely invest in one of these. Now, as you can appreciate, this is not a difficult hobby to get into. So far, we need a knife, a couple of knives, $3, $10, $5. A metal ruler is obviously handy. I'm gonna leave out the most obvious stuff, like you'll want a cutting mat. It will make your life easier. And under my cutting mat is a stone. The stone is useful for absorbing sound when you're banging in with punches. It's also useful for skiving on, because if you take your skiving knife and start skiving on your mat, what you're going to do is cut out a big chunk of your mat, and then you're going to need to go buy another one, which is probably not optimum. Now, once you've got your lines marked for where you want to put your stitching, you are of course going to need to bang some holes in. Now here's where punches come in. So I'm going to show you a couple of different types. So first off, you have diamond punches, and for strap work I use a 3 and 4 millimeter. This will give you quite a big difference between your stitching. So this is 4 millimeter stitching, and this is 3 millimeter stitching. So you can see the density of the stitching is quite substantially different here. If I can get that on camera. So you wouldn't think that difference between 3 and 4 millimeter would make much difference, but it does. Now these are diamond punches. These are cheap, and obviously they come with more prongs on them, so you're not there for 4 hours banging your holes in. I would recommend these when you're starting out. A lot of people don't like them. You get some snobbier leather workers that will insist on using a French punch, which is one of these. So this is a 3.8 millimeter French punch, so 4 millimeters near as damn it. This is expensive. A good set of these is going to set you back in the hundreds of dollars. And I'm not joking. And you'll probably want a normal set and a reverse set. So if you're just starting out, I would leave off on these for a while. They are expensive, and the diamond punches do a good enough job. Now, if you go onto AliExpress, you'll see a cheap version of this French punch. If you want my advice, don't buy it. It's terrible. The cheap ones are terrible, or at least the ones on the market at the recording of this video. They don't punch clean holes. They get stuck in the leather. You can file them down. I've filed this one down a little bit to see if I could get it to do anything. It's of a size that I very rarely use, so I didn't want to go and drop a couple of $100. So I did that thing we're all guilty of. I went and bought the cheap one, and it's basically for the dustbin. It's useless. I'd rather use a smaller diamond punch than buy one of these cheap French punches. So now you've got your cutting implements, you've got your thing to make your lines, you've got your punches. You'll need something to bang the punches in. For me, I mainly use a 200-gram hammer with a bit of leather on the end. This is just to stop me damaging the end of my punches. I also use this for knocking stitches down after they've been stitched in. So nice and cheap, easy peasy, use anything you like. Now there are specialist ones for leather workers. Well, I wouldn't call them specialist, but you can use something like this nylon maul here for also giving your punches a whack. Works reasonably well. It's noisier though than the small hammer with a bit of leather on it. So your mileage might vary. If you're in an area where you've got to keep the noise down, you want a big thick stone like the one under my mat here, and you probably want to use a hammer that's deadened with a bit of leather on the end. It'll keep your noise down quite considerably. Now to put your holes in, I don't think this needs to demonstrate, but you'll just line your punch up on your marking hole here and give it a whack. easy enough. I'm more concentrated on the tools and what you can save your cash on at the moment than I am concentrated on how you actually do this stuff. I have videos on the channel for how to make straps and small leather goods, so this is literally just the tools. And something else I think I forgot to mention is the metal ruler. Any metal ruler will do. Don't use a plastic one. Your knife will cut into it, and yeah, it'll just be a mess. So we can now punch holes, we can cut leather. I think I've covered all the knives you'll need to do these things. Let's take a look at what else you might punch with. So these are punches for making round holes, 1.5mm and 1mm respectively. This is the cheap version. This is the more expensive version. Honestly, unless you are going into business to do this, use any one you like. This one will wear out faster, the cheap one, obviously. This one will last a bit longer. But if you just want to produce a few watch straps, maybe you want to make a wallet as a Christmas gift or something, or one for yourself, then these cheapy ones are honestly fine. I think I've banged in like 100 holes with this and it's still good. So, you know, your mileage might vary. Not a lot of expense to this kind of thing anyway. I would recommend 1.5mm for banging in watch holes, by the way. Depending on your buckle type, but 1.5mm is generally pretty good for just about anything. So, easy enough. Now, string I want to talk about, thread. This is one of those things that you cannot cheap out on. So, these are the threads that I use most commonly. This is a polyester waxing. It's a handmade wax thread. It's very good. It's also fairly expensive. So a spool of this stuff is around $10. Now that might not sound a lot, but when you need, 27 different colors and you use quite a bit of it, the price gets up there. I would not, 100% would not recommend that you cheap out on the string. It'll just make your life miserable. So I use quite a bit of this waxing polyester when I need an odd color. But what I use 90% of the time is this stuff. This is linen. This is MEISI, MEISI. I'm sure there's a way to pronounce that I don't know. And this stuff is 3mm linen or 0.3mm linen thread. This stuff is great. It's fantastic. You cannot actually burn it though to close your stitching ends. So I'll cover, I'm sure in a video at some point, how to use linen thread. This stuff's brilliant. It looks superb on a strap. In fact, I think I can give you an example. It's super clean. This is super small stitching and it comes out super clean and lovely looking. This strap is not finished, by the way. So after I've had chance to knock this stitching flat, it will look considerably better, but just out of the box with no work done at all. Looks pretty good. I love this stuff. It is, however, about $20 a spool, so not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. However, would recommend. M30 and M40 is what I use mostly for watch straps. By the way, you can see this uses the same sizing convention, M30 and M40. That would be, I believe, 3.5 and 4.5mm, or 3.5 and 0.4. Somewhere around there. But if you look for waxing handmade thread, you should be able to find it. I'll link the place where I buy it down below. I actually get all of my string out of Singapore, so maybe you can find somewhere local that's a bit cheaper. Now, other tools that I use that are a little bit unusual as one of these things. This is just a bit of wood with a nail of the right size put through it, and I'll heat this up on an alcohol flame or a blowtorch, whatever I've got handy, and I use this when it's hot to push through the top of a strap where the spring bars would go, and this will burn out any straggly bits of leather, and it will burn out the edge paint or melt the edge paint into the hole and leave you with a nice round spring bar hole. So this one has no edge paint at the minute, unfinished. As I say, that will need a bit of filing out, but you get the point. One of these is super useful if you want to make straps. Okay, other sundriest bits and bobs that I use are obviously glue spreaders. These cheap ones are absolutely fine. I also use these cheap scissors for cutting thread. They do a lovely job. AliExpress job, again, a couple of bucks. All right, let's have a chat about finishing. So for finishing, I use these clamps to hold the work. They're just the stuff you buy at the paper shop, really, covered with a bit of leather. And I use various different sizes of these. They make work holding quite simple. So basically, you would take your whatever you're trying to finish the edge of, bang it in there, and it's just a nice way to hold that nice and steady for yourself. If you're dealing with something a bit longer, then obviously you can bring in a bigger clamp. This will hold it steady while you sand through it. So I really like these. They're really cheap. Just need a bit of leather to line them with. Excellent. Would recommend all day long. So let's have a look at what I use to finish edges and the paint. Well, not more the paint. You can use any edge paint you want. Now, I've been using an edge paint that's business to business sale only. It's difficult to get, so I'll recommend some other brands of edge paint down in the comments. But to do the painting, I use these refillable paint tube things. They're actually pretty good. They're easy to use, and it saves you getting paint all over the place. So as you can see, you can just paint with these. Quite nice. Now, I do finish off my edges in the traditional French manner, which would be to take an owl, and well, I'll show you in a second. I have to apologize for the audio on this video. This is a kind of informal video for me, just having a chat. Hopefully you enjoy it. I'm not voicing this over afterwards. I'm just, sitting down here with all of you folks, hopefully giving you some tips of what you need to get started. So after I've painted the edge with the paint pens, it will be sanded and then painted with the paint pens again, and then sanded, and then painted, and then sanded. And the final edge I'll put on with an owl, just a bog standard marking owl I normally use. I'll dip that into the paint and put the final edge on by hand. Now, I can cover all the techniques for leather work in another video, of course, but right now I just want to get the tools covered. So after you've finished your edges, you'll need to cut your edges. You'll need to bevel them. Well, you won't need to, but it gives a very nice look. And this, again, is a tool that you don't want to save your money on. So this is an edge beveler. I can't remember now, but I think these are $50 plus. They're not cheap for sure. Now, the cheaper versions of these are hideous. Don't buy them. You'll end up just with a very painful experience. I wish I had a cheaper one to demonstrate, but I can demonstrate for you the way the more expensive one work, and that is lovely and nice and easily. So if you have been struggling with a cheaper one, it's not your technique probably. It's probably the cheapness of the tool. And those also come in obviously a lot of different sizes. Here's a big chungus one. And as you can see, that just takes a big slice out of your leather. Nice for doing heavy bevel. For strap work, number 5, I think it's 0.6 millimeter is what I use pretty much all the time. And these are just an absolute pleasure to use. Very, very easy to use. A lot of people have issues with edge beveling. I've seen in the comments of my other videos, so it's probably just because you're using the wrong tools. Now, on a tool you can buy for cheap, and probably should, this is a saddler's file. These are a couple of bucks a piece. Now, if you want to stick 2 pieces of leather down together on the skin side, you need to take the finish off. And a saddler's file is excellent for that. Now, you can use a bit of sandpaper, but as these are so cheap, they get the thumbs up from me for whatever that's worth to you. Cheap tools that you shouldn't buy, in my opinion, are one of these. This one wasn't even that cheap. It's an edge roller. So rather than using a paint pen, you can use one of these edge rollers to roll on the paint. Now, I'm not saying edge rolling itself is bad. Of course not. You can get some very nice edge rollers, but avoid this one, in my opinion, that has the roller fixed by a screw on the top. Now, this tool looks nice. It's stainless steel. It wasn't even that cheap. I think it was about $15. It doesn't work because when you dip this in paint, the whole end gets gummed up, and sure enough, it stops rolling. So at that point, you need to drip paint on this part, on the twisty part, or drip paint on the edge of the leather and then use it, because if you just dip this in paint, it's not going to work. But if it doesn't work if you dip it in paint, I don't understand why you wouldn't just finish with the traditional French method. So for me, this specific design of it is absolutely useless. Would not recommend. Let's cover this first because I see it on the bench in front of me. This is just a pair of pliers with some leather in, and you can use this to flatten down stitching after it's gone in. Now, a good set of parallel pliers is much better. Wider parallel pliers. But the good set of those will go into the 50, 60 bucks, and this is just your cheapest of the cheap big box hardware store pliers, couple of bucks. So yep, this will get you going. Now, I discussed string but not needles, and again I said I'm doing this video kind of off the cuff here. So I'm just kind of picking items up that I see on my workbench of what you'll need. So I use Tapestry needles by John James. These things are brilliant. These are not the sizes I use for the smaller holes. These would be for much larger holes than would be done on a strap. For the size I use on smaller holes, it's 24 or 26. So again, these are available worldwide, I believe. They're fantastic for leather work. They're blunt at one end, which is very nice, and they have a huge hole for the string to go through. So if you're looking for a tip for what you should be sewing with, there you go, John James. Now, for me, this is going to be specific to straps. I use templates to cut around all of my straps, and for that you'll need a 3D printer. You can print these out on paper and stick them on, or I'll make the STL file available for this strap in the description of this video, by the way. So if you want to print it, you can then follow along with the video I did last week on how you make a strap that looks something like this. Very nice strap, padded, thin at one end, just superior strap in my opinion, although I am blowing my own trumpet a little bit there. Now, one thing I wanted to cover with straps, templates, or in fact any templates, is how I get them to stick to the leather. So these have all had contact cement put on the back. Okay, so this helps the thing stay in place, because if you've 3D printed your template, it'll be slippery. It'll slip and slide on the leather, but you can see with a bit of contact cement on there, it stays nice and secure. And this is more important than you might think, because when you cut down your leather, so as you cut on your leather, it has the tendency to twist and bend. It doesn't matter how hard you hold the template down. If the template slides, you can bend the leather out of place. And with strap work, you need accuracy in the sub-millimeters. So you're going to find that that becomes an issue for you with the leather bending underneath. So a little bit of contact cement underneath, let it dry, don't put it on wet, and it creates kind of a rubberness underneath that helps it grip. I also quite a lot use double-sided tapes. You've got this one from 3M that's just a couple of millimeters. This is especially handy for holding down work that you are going to skive, that you are going to cut thinner. So just a couple of sizes of 3M tape. I'm not a tape expert, I just buy the 3M because it's decent enough and it's really not that expensive. So other than that, there's not a lot to go over with small leather goods production. There's some other specifics, like a bone tool here is very nice. It's really just a piece of bone, can be used for marking, flattening stitches, accentuating padding, which I use it for quite a lot. So if you have a strap that you've padded, you can use this to accentuate the padding here. Okay, very handy tool, also very cheap. Again, specific to strap making would be a way to cut quick release spring bars. That would be one of these little jobbies. And again, I'm going to link all this, but this is not necessary at all. I personally don't like quick release spring bars that much. I just do it for clients. So go ahead and skip this one if I were you, unless you happen to love quick release. In which case one of these is going to set you back around $50, $60. Or you can buy the Swiss Bergeon one for, well, you can put a nought on the end of that price, basically. So I think that covers pretty much what you need to cut, sew, and finish the edges of your strap. Now, to finish the edges, bit of beeswax, and you'll need to heat that so it melts. But you're literally going to rub the beeswax along the edge and then use a hot iron to melt that. Also, you've got your Toconol for burnishing, Mine looks like it's been through a war zone, and I know on YouTube videos it's nice to show people tools that are in pristine condition and everything looking perfect, but I actually work for a living, so that's just not what my workbench looks like. You can use a standard leather balm for finishing. I use a mixture of beeswax and olive oil, plenty of things for finishing. It's a topic unto itself. Really, it is. There's a lot I could cover on that, but I think that about covers it. Now, there is one other very specialist tool that I use for leatherwork. Now, this tool can be applied to straps, to wallets, to bags, to anything, and that's one of these creasing tools. You might have seen me use this. It needs to be heated up. Now, there are specialist machines for heating these things. These come in various sizes, by the way. That's 1 mil. This is, I believe, a 1.5. Yep. So they come in various sizes and various profiles. Now I'm going to give you a tip here that might save you a bit of cash too. So this is the end of a temperature controlled soldering iron. Now normally to use these things for leather work, you would buy a specific leather tool for this, a leather iron, sort of a hot soldering iron thing specifically designed for leatherwork. But if you happen to have a temperature controlled iron lying around for electronics or, you know, home repair stuff, you can do what I did, which is just, and I'm going to link this. I just think this is a nice tip to save you some cash. So this is an adapter for 3D printed inserts that's designed to go onto a soldering iron. The thing is, this is $2. And then once you've got the adapter on, you'll then need a M4, in this case, to M5 adapter, which I just cut with a die. If you've got a tap and die set, you can just cut your own, or I am absolutely sure there are adapters from M4 to M5. And then you can take your creasing end here and screw that on. And what you've got is basically now a temperature controlled iron that would be the same as a very expensive leather specific one, and you've got the leather specific end on it. So you can then use that, put a rather nice crease down your leather. Now I don't actually have this one connected at the moment, so you're probably not going to see that well, but again, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll have seen me crease leather. This is a really nice cheap way to experiment around with these if you happen to already have a soldering iron. I've used the professional leather ones, does the same job. Never noticed the difference personally, although the professional leather ones have handles that are slightly nicer to hold. But yeah, it's horses for courses really. Doing it this way, if you have an iron that's temperature controlled, will cost you a few bucks, and doing it the other way will cost you $200-300. So yep, the choice on that one is yours. Now I think this video is about to come to an end. I'm pretty sure I have covered here everything you need to know, or all the tools at least, not the techniques of course, but everything you need in terms of tools to get started. Now it's really not a lot of money if you go down the cheaper route, and I recommend that you do go down the cheaper route. Not for certain tools though. Let's have a look. This, useless, cheap, don't buy it. Cheaper versions of this, do not buy it. Cheaper versions of the thread, don't buy it. Now you might have gotten some cheap thread and gotten away with it, but I can tell you over time the investment in thread is going to be well worth it, especially if you are just learning how to sew leather. That cheap thread is a nightmare to work with. I have problems with it, and I have spent hundreds of hours sewing leather. So yeah, that's about it really. I hope you enjoyed this one. This is a different style video for me, so please do let me know what you think, because I've never really sat down before and done a video like this where I'm not voicing it over afterwards. So hopefully this comes out all right and the audio is okay. Bit nervous about this one, so if I rambled on a bit, do forgive me. But I think if you want to get started in especially strap production, this should cover the tools you need. And as I say, I will link my template down below. You should be able to resize it on your slicer, so it should do you a variety of sizes. I'll look into getting a proper CAD file out to you all so you can just resize my templates to whatever size you might need. But for now, I'll get that STL file in the description. All right, I think I am going to love you and leave you. It was very nice to talk to you, and hopefully you found this somewhat useful.